Our first semi-final match features a clash of Koreans and a family feud as Samsung White takes on Samsung Blue. Samsung White entered the quarterfinals as the #2 team from Korea, but as we have been saying throughout Worlds, they have looked more like the #1 team. They faced the #1 North American LCS squad TSM in a best-of-5 that most people expected White to dominate.
And after the two quick victories from games 1 and 2, it kind of looked like that thriller that most people were expecting, but the North Americans actually made it a bit more of a difficult trip. TSM pushed back in game 3, pressured all the lanes, and finally won a game against the Korean squad for the first time in the team's history. But of course, White responded rather nicely in game 4. Imp picked up his second pentakill at Worlds, and by the end of that game, Imp had 10 kills, Pawn had 9 kills, and the Koreans had earned that trip into the semifinals.
Yeah, and in last week's second quarterfinal series, Samsung Blue faced the #2 North American team, Cloud9. After a stunning upset by Cloud9 in game 1, Blue responded in the next 2 games, shutting down High's Mission Impossible and controlling the map. By the end of game 3, they looked like they had fully recovered from C9's initial victory and were ready to head into the semifinals.
But in game 4, Cloud9 proved they wouldn't go down without a fight, which led to one of the most exciting moments of the quarterfinals. 32 minutes in, gigantic gold lead for Samsung Blue, but C9 got picks on Adade, Deft, and Acorn at the same time. They pushed into Blue's base and brought the Nexus down to 30% health before Samsung Blue fully respawned, killed the rest of C9's members, and then pushed all the way back across the map into the base and secured their spot in the semifinals.
Yeah, incredibly exciting end to this series, and with that game 4 win, the #1 team from Korea now faces their most difficult test yet at Worlds, Samsung White, a team they've had the upper hand against during the season. Monty, which matchup are you looking at in this series, and what's going to be the key focus?
I think you have to talk about the AD carries in this series. Of course, both Imp and Deft have put out standout performances, and really, they're kind of each of them is kind of the quintessence of their team's style. We have Deft, who's put out games with over 50% of his team's damage to champions. We've had Imp with his big flashy pentakills, his big playmaking ability on champions like Twitch. And so we have that very strong lane presence with Imp, and we have that very strong team fight presence with Deft. So a little bit of a kind of opposite ends of the spectrum.
Yeah, and coming into quarters, it was really like everyone expected Imp and Deft to have very different playstyles, but it seems like they have a lot more similar than people gave them credit for to begin with. Imp struggled against Wild Turtle just like Deft struggled against Sneaky. They're both signature champions. The champion that they have the highest proficiency on seems to be Twitch. They both explode in team fights, but yeah, they had kind of a weak laning phase in the quarters. So yeah, they're a lot more similar than I had expected.
And for me, with the AD carries being a bit similar, the matchup I care about a little bit more is the jungle matchup there between Dandy and Spirit. Dandy, for the last 18 months, has been probably the best jungler in the world. He's one of the big stars of Samsung White, incredible player overall. He will get in your mind, he will counter jungle you, and he's incredible, and he's been at the top of his game for pretty much forever. Spirit, though, hasn't been part of that conversation, I think, until very recently. I think he's had a killer tournament so far, especially in the quarterfinals against C9. I think he can not only dethrone Dandy and maybe take the spot as best jungler in the world, but also he can single-handedly win his team the game, because Samsung Blue, if they get any kind of lead at 20 minutes, 90% of the time, they just win the game from that. And if for once in his life, basically, Spirit can beat up on Dandy, this is Samsung Blue's series.
Do you agree with that, Double? If I know we were talking about these two junglers off air. Care to chime in?
Yeah, so I think jungle is a really great position to carry from, and Dandy and Spirit just kind of embody that so well. They control the pace of the game, and especially from the jungle position, as soon as you get a lead, you can impact the map instantly. Whereas if you're winning mid lane or bottom lane, it kind of takes a while for you to snowball that roam. You have to set up vision, you have to come back to lane with more items, but these guys just know exactly instantly. They'll pressure the map and control it.
See, we've been talking a lot about matchups so far, but I want to take a broader look at the game and talk about picks and bans. If we see how White lost their match against TSM, that was basically them becoming overconfident in pick and ban phase. While if you look at Blue, their mistakes were more gameplay related, and they actually had a solid draft phase. So I'm looking forward to how this plays out, as well as the fact that they're sister teams. So they know each other for a while already. And have they adapted? Have they practiced against each other recently? How is this going to play out?
Well, and if we talk about that, I think we have to look at the historical pick and ban as well coming in here. Because if you look at the last semifinal, yeah, Twitch was a big contested pick there as well. Blue was either first picking it on Blue's side or just banning it out. But White was having to ban out some of Dade signature champions, that Zed, that Yasuo, had to be banned out every single game. That gave White very limited flexibility in terms of their strategies. Now Pawn is much more comfortable on both of those champions. And if we look at pick and ban this tournament, Blue has been just banning pretty much every single game, Alistar and Zillion every time. So I think that the shift that we're seeing from the last time these two teams met in a best-of-5 till now is that we are going to have a much better drafting phase for White compared to Blue. That, combined with their early game dominance, I think is going to give them a leg up, even if they're a little bit behind in terms of late game strategy. And I expect White to start focusing on Spirit because he has had a really good tournament, but he's not the same quality of Rengar player that Dandy is. You take away the Lee Sin and the Kazakhs, I think that White will have a good time.
Well, we'll have to find out how that does pan out. Before that, though, let's